Oh, there we go. It's happening. No, it's
Cool.
not. Sorry, it's technology. Oh, here we go. Hey, we're live.
All right.
Cool. All right, man. Well, thanks for coming out and chatting with me. And by
Mhm.
coming out, I mean staying home and turning on your computer.
Exactly.
Yeah, for sure. Okay, so most of the people on my page obviously, or at least hopefully, know who I am, but I'll give a quick rundown. My name is Greg Kuchkarson. I am an artist and realtor living in Los Angeles, California. I am artistic director of a theater company called Buzzworks Theater. I'm also a licensed realtor out here with Keller Williams Realty Glendale. I specifically requested Jonathan to come talk to me today because I think he's very insightful and he's got a lot of good things to say, especially for artists, especially for millennials, and especially if you're looking to buy a home. I largely became realtor specifically because I want to help millennials and artists find a path to home ownership that makes sense for them and their budget. And this was just a way for me to be able to do that. And doing these webinars is just another way to be able to do that. And also they're a lot of fun because it's boring amongst COVID times. But anyway, so Jonathan is a camera assistant. He was working with CBS before all this COVID stuff went down. And he found a path to home ownership that makes sense for him and his budget. And he's currently living in LA, for free, not free, but anyways, he's got a budget that's working out for him, and he did it through a very cool program called NACA. And he's going to tell us a little bit about that. I'm going to ask some questions. Feel free to type in your questions into the comment section of Facebook, and I will field those questions and ask them as they come along. But again, thank you, Jonathan. Feel free to introduce yourself any more that you like to.
You did a pretty good job with that.
I'm pretty good at everything, I'll be honest.
Yeah. Just I really, when you asked me to do this, I was really impressed because the program I was able to go through definitely can gear toward artists. It's a good program. I want to preface, I'm not a spokesperson for it. And once we go through the webinar, you'll realize why. Because I'll just give you my realistic experience that I have with the program, which there's positives, negatives to anything. And this will definitely spell that out.
Right on. Cool, man. Okay, so we'll start right off with NACA. So this program is specifically geared, please correct me if I'm wrong, because you're the one that's actually gone through the program. I've just meandered and learned a lot as much as I possibly can, but it's specifically geared for low-income families to find them a way into a home with no money down, a low interest rate, and a majority of closing costs covered. And I'll link that right now to the comment section, but go ahead and tell us about your experience. Day one, you found out about NACA.
Yeah.
What did you do?
So day one, I just looked on the website. It's called NACA.org. It stands for Neighborhood Assistance Corporation of America. They advertise something on the front page where like, this sounds too good to be true. It says zero money down, no very low closing costs. I mean, you don't have to come to the table with that much at closing. And second, it's below market interest rates. Market interest rates right now are very low, so it's kind of hard to beat that. But those were the three things that I was like, this is interesting. So they start off with what's called a home buyer's workshop. They might have changed the names of these things. It has been a few years since I've gone through this, but they called it a home buyer's workshop. That's where they introduce you to what the program is. They introduce you to basic budgeting to make sure that your financial picture is in a way that NACA can read it. And what I mean by that is you just need to make sure that you calculate out all your income, all your debts, so you have a clear picture of when the mortgage or the loan officer comes and takes a look at your file. They understand how much you pay out every month, how much you make every month. And that's basically how that first one went. At the very end of that, it was about a 4-hour workshop. I went to one down in Hawthorne, if anyone's familiar with the Los Angeles area. They give you this little yellow booklet, which you'll know will become infamous during your process. They might have changed the color, but for us, that yellow booklet was with me to the end. You wrote on that how ready you are. You're basically saying, I heard everything that these people are saying. I'm 100% ready to move forward to the next step. And that's where they assign you your NACA ID. And that's where they assign you your mortgage counselor, they call it. And that's the person who goes with you from where you are at that point to closing. And their mortgage counselor's with you. I wrote 100% because obviously if you know anything about going through papers, you need to write 100% because then they say, okay, this guy's ready. So I was able to get a mortgage counselor the following few weeks. You meet with them, and that's where they you exchange emails. They say, you need to come to our meeting with a lot of documents that reflect your financial situation. And then they guide you through on how to present it. Now, if you know anything, the one thing I learned in my job as an artist is my job is to make other jobs, people's jobs easier. So that's it. That was really all. So if you're thinking about this person's going to give you the answers, you need to go into it saying, I'm going to provide the answers for this person, because then that was it for me to able to move through the process a little bit faster. And then you go through the qualification period. That's where you're emailing back and forth with your mortgage counselor saying that you need to be ready. You need to have your file, you need to have your finances or some debts paid off, or some consistency of payments. The guidance varies, but you just need to be in a position where you're ready to buy. And that's situational dependent, but that's dependent upon the mortgage counselor. As soon as you go through the steps that they lay out, then you're ready to buy. And that means that you can make offers on properties. You can go out with your real estate agent and say, hey, I want to make an offer on that property for X amount. Now, what NACA does is you need to send them the listing prior to making an offer. It's what's called a property specific letter, or PSL. That's where NACA takes a look at it. And through their calculations, they say you can actually afford this property at this cost. So then you go, great, I'm going to make an offer of whatever it is. And then you can tell the seller, my lender's already looked at this property specifically, and they say, I can do that with these terms. How you operate and how you negotiate is up to you. And then once the offer is accepted, then the mortgage counselor kind of fades out, and then you work with your escrow department. That's the department where you go from your offer being accepted to closing. And then you have a lot of back and forth with the agents within escrow, within NACA's escrow. And then you can close if everything works. Yeah. I'm very careful saying that because I had a tremendously frustrating experience with NACA. I'm not going to sugarcoat it. It was very difficult. I was able to close, and I'm now living in that property that I closed after renovation. So it was a phenomenal end goal experience, but everything in between was terribly frustrating.
But I just want to make sure that when you came to closing for this property, like, did you actually have to bring in any of your own money, or was it?
I did, and part of it was traditional real estate transactions. So I made an offer on the property. The property was accepted. Then we went into negotiations. But to do this, I had to put an earnest money deposit down. That's basically saying you're putting your money where your mouth is. You want the property, and you're putting money in this place to represent that your desire to get it. So I put $10,000 down, which is a doable amount for any financially savvy person. And then at closing, I knew I wanted to have the loan for long term, right? And they do 30 and 15-year fixed rates. Don't change, nothing changes. You pay the same principal and interest for the length that you hold that loan. I wanted a lower rate because I know it would save me more money in the long term in interest. So I did what's called buying points down. And so I bought 2 points off, which means I bought 0.5% of my total loan limit or total loan length. So instead of 4.25, I dropped down to 3.75. At that time when I closed, that was a really good rate. And so I had to come to the table with around 18,000 because I chose to buy it down. That's not required. And then the closing costs, they covered about 70 to 75%. So the closing costs, I only paid probably about 3,000 or 4,000. So at the closing table, I was out 21,000 and 10,000. So I was able to obtain ownership of a property for $31,000 in Los Angeles. And that's true. I have the HUD statement to prove it.
Right on. Okay. And then I just want to clarify, you don't actually have to buy points down. That was something that you chose to do because you had very specific goals. Right. And that's actually something we're going to talk about a little bit during this talk, is how important it is to have goals when you're going through a process like NACA or something else like HomePath, or in general, just buying the homeowner, like buying a home. Like you have to know what you want. You have to know what you're willing to give up. And you also have to know what you need, how much actual money you need to come by. Right. Can you tell us a little bit about like NACA's like mission statement, essentially, like what they're out to do, what they're hoping to get done out in the world?
Yeah, NACA's their main mentality is they believe that improving neighborhoods is done so by owning. And so that's really the element, is they think low and moderate income earners can still own properties. Because a lot of low income people are very good with money. They're fantastic with it. And that's really what lenders want to see, the people who actually back the loans by NACA. They want to see that somebody is knows how to pay debts. They know how to understand budgeting. They know how to understand finances. So financial education is really important, but you don't need to overthink it. It's just being good with numbers, knowing how much you have coming in, knowing how much you have going out. And if you consistently can show that you can repay your debts, then lenders are like, great, those are the kind of people we want to lend to. And that's the back NACA. And so with that, they just want to make sure that instead of using government aid and things like that to improve neighborhoods, it's the pride of the people owning that really improve neighborhoods.
Cool. And then we actually have a question from my friend Liliana. She wants to know how long the process was. And I know the answer to this one, and I'm excited to hear you talk about it a little bit.
So from my home buyers workshop to closing, that was 15 months.
15 months,
right? That was 15 months.
Yes. So that is a really long time for the homeownership process. I want to make sure that we're super clear on that. 15 months is quite long. God bless your realtor, man. But
he was the guiding force during us.
But I want to clarify at least that when people like going through 15 months of this home process or home buying process for Jonathan, a lot of people spend decades trying to get themselves into a home. So while the time was spent, 15 months sounds like a really long time, it actually isn't if you start like early on and you are very clear about what your goals are, as opposed to spending God knows how long just trying to scrape together 20% down, that most people think that you need, where in reality, most people typically only put down 3 to 5%. And in this case, even less than that.
Yeah. And there were a couple caveats of my situation. I want to be clear. This was my situation only. My escrow alone was 4 months. Okay. And that is a much, much long, I mean, even commercial deals, 120 days is like, oh, who's dragging their feet? So for that, mine was very specific because I had some property specific issues that held up the process.
Yeah.
So that added to the 15 months. Also, it took me 6 months to get qualified simply because they wanted a 2-year work history and I only had a year and a half. So most of that time was us to get to that point where I could prove a 2-year consistent work history. So that was from January to July of 2018 when I was going through that process. If people have, provable, replicable income over 2 years, that timeline will be shortened. Also, I was going for a multifamily. People who wanted single family homes, they could get through the process quicker. So it's all, a lot of what I'm saying is it actually happened to me, but that doesn't mean it'll be someone who goes through the same program. That won't be the same experience.
I feel like I remember you telling me that you had actually, you had a friend who also went through the program who bought a single family, like a 3-2, and the process was like a quarter of the time that yours was. Am I remembering that right?
You're correct on that, right? They did buy a 3-2. Their process was shorter. I don't know off the top of my head how long it was.
Okay.
But you also need to understand that you're technically buying, even though a 1 unit and a 3 unit are in the same asset, like residential loan, there's a lot of different math that goes into place. And there's a lot of very fine lines that multifamily properties need to hit that single family properties don't. It's a straight formula versus multifamily. You need to calculate how much rents you can include. So say if my mortgage was $1,000, so for the sake of simplicity, right?
Yeah.
And the property currently is collecting $500 in income. That means I would have to come to the table with $500, right? It's not that simple because lenders want to say, well, you know what about vacancies? So they'll take a percentage off of the income that you bring in. And so that's where the math gets a little bit complicated that you need to learn. And that'll all go through the process.
Right.
And also something I want to be very clear, the NACA people who work there, they have good hearts, but a lot of them are overworked, underpaid, and undertrained. And when you're working with complex financial dealings, you have to deal with that. And I was learning it as I went. And I just got insanely frustrated with the process. It was very difficult, not impossible, it was very difficult. And so people wouldn't return calls. People had poor email etiquette. People wouldn't answer questions. You couldn't get a hold of anybody. There wasn't a general resource center where I could get my questions answered on the web. Their website is functional, but it's not ideal. And so it's just like, it just was like banging my head against a wall. And it's, again, I don't want to deter people. I just think that they need to understand that this isn't like going in and buying a Coke from the corner store. Right. You have to really want it, and the people who are determined will get through it.
Right. And I just want to clarify, like, it's not like regardless of what kind of loan you have, or even if you have all cash, it will never be like buying a Coke from the
Oh, no.
store. So there's always going to be some issues. There's going to be snafus. And just this program specifically geared, like you said, they're overworked, as I'm sure many of us can relate to. And they're just trying to make some moderate to low income families find a way to home ownership that makes sense for them. Could you tell us, now that you haven't sugarcoated it, what excited you about the program? What was it that first drew you to the program? Why did it make sense for you and your wife?
Well, I worked freelance for 10, 12 years, you know,
Mhm.
some months you can make 10,000, some months you can make 0. A
Mhm.
lot of lenders, conventional lenders, if you go to a Wells Fargo, Chase, or a bank, they say, oh, great, show us your W-2 statement. And so I was like, here's 15. Cause I worked, you know, I was a gig contract worker, you know?
Yeah.
So, and they go, this is too confusing for me. And they'd say, no, well, you have to have 20%. And you're like, well, who has, you know, the average home price in Los Angeles is $750,000. That means if you're doing the math right, just for a down payment, you need upwards of 150 grand liquid in the bank for down payment.
Right.
Which is just unattainable
Right.
unless you just hit the jackpot with one of your jobs. It just wasn't realistic. And so I knew about some of the programs, about 5% down, 3.5% down with FHA, but they still just weren't doing it. And when I was starting the real estate process back in 2017 to actually look and buying, I was just talking to real estate agents. And after their laughter died down the third time, I was like, well, what can I do? And I think it was the 5th or 6th realtor that I spoke to who recommended this program. And that's how I found out about it. And it just seemed too good to be true. But I was like, okay, it's a 4-hour workshop. What could I lose? And then they informed me the basics of it. And I was like, great. And I honestly was going through it. And I was going through other programs at the same time because I was like, might as well see what I can do. This one just happened to have teeth to it, and I was able to move through it because of that promise of me going in and not putting any money down to buy a property. And the other caveat, or the other addition here, is NACA will also finance the renovations if renovations need to be done. Not everything. They won't go lavish with it and be necessary repairs. But that means that if you're—
Wait, are you telling me that I wouldn't be able to add a jacuzzi?
No.
Into...
The funny thing is, actually, NACA has 2 types of borrowers. They have ones that the programs are designed for, low and moderate income earners, and those who aren't designed for. Say they make just a little bit above their income limits. They change those limits, so I'm not going to quote them because I don't know off the top of my head. But they will still service that client that makes over that amount. But they just have a couple separations between them. If you're a target member, one who the program's designed for, then you can maybe, if you get a good price on the property, you can get a little bit more. You can put in some extra things that aren't required. Versus if you're one that's right outside that limit, then you can only finance repairs that are required. Being like if it's poor plumbing, if you need to upgrade electrical, kind of like the boring stuff that's not flashy. But they still will finance into that, and then it just wraps up into your mortgage, and you have one mortgage payment.
Right on. Okay, so you're an artist. You're living in Southern California.
Yeah.
You found a property that works for you with a program that, albeit as frustrating as it actually was, it ended up
frustrating it is.
as frustrating as it was, you ended up with a property in California. Can you tell us what it feels like to like just be like not to stress so much about? Because I mean, you're doing something a little bit more interesting. I'll get into that really briefly. But we want to extrapolate because I really want to keep the topic about the program itself, not so much your specific property. But you have tenants who pay you rent, which offsets a lot of your mortgage costs, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, cool. So you use this program in an unconventional program in an unconventional way, leading you as an artist to essentially pursue any passion that you want, as long as you come up with that X amount of mortgage that you have left over, right?
Yeah, and I won't go into too specific details on numbers, but the time I collected rent, like everything through this entire process, was not confident I was going to close. I was not confident the repairs, because we had to do a massive renovation on this property. Again, my specific property, not, you can buy properties that are turnkey or need light rehab. Fine. That wasn't our strategy. And this was a choice that we made early on because we wanted to have value and grow and add the value to the property. And that was a choice we made. And so we went through, it was like a 9-month renovation, which
that's long. It's really long.
In my head, it felt like it was a 15-year renovation because I had so much at the end of it. And that maybe is a time for another, but it was very frustrating. But when I collected my first rent check, it was only about 30% of my mortgage at that time because one unit came up before the other ones did. it was such a rewarding, small nominal amount of money, but I was like, someone just paid me money for the thing that I built. This is fantastic.
Yeah. Cool, man. All right. So,
Yeah.
So I actually got another question. I answered it directly in the comments, but Liliana asked, she's assuming that the NACA program is first-time homeowners. Is that correct?
No, it's not correct.
Oh, it's not. Then I'm wrong. I replied to her incorrectly. My
No,
bad.
and the thing is, you can only have one NACA loan, a loan that's underwritten by NACA. But say for some reason you buy a NACA property or a property through NACA, you sell, and you go 3 years without home ownership, you can go through the NACA program again. But you can't own 2 NACA loans at one time. You can't own 2 NACA properties.
So if you have one conventional loan and then you're like, I gotta move for whatever reason, could you get a NACA loan and then still hold on to the conventional, or do you have to get rid of the conventional before you can get into the NACA?
I'll specify that. You cannot own real estate while going through the NACA process.
Okay.
Cool. That if you are a former owner and then sold and now are no longer an owner and want to go through again, yes. But if you have multiple properties right now and you go through the NACA loan, you can't get a loan.
Okay, cool. So I want to move away from NACA now, just so that we can get to talk about a few other products that are out there for people who need to buy homes, other artists, they're millennials that maybe NACA doesn't sound so interesting to them because it is a long process, because it can be frustrating. What else is out there for, let's just say, like a vet who's like also working as an artist?
Yeah, veterans actually have a lot. There's a couple options. The 2 main ones are just Veterans Affairs loans, VA loans they're called. I'm not an expert on those, but they can usually do low percentage down as well. Some I've heard can do 0%, but there's usually a 0 to 3% range. And that's if you have served, had any active duty, or you are the offspring of someone who's a direct offspring, not once removed. Like if your grandfather served in World War II, sorry guys, but if it's a direct daughter or son of a service member. And the second is what's called a Cal Vet loan, which is a little bit different. They have more asset classes. You can include farmland. You can include more rural properties.
Oh, cool.
But that's something that's out there. Again, low percentage down as well. I don't know them off the top of my head, but they're definitely less than 10%.
All right on. Okay. And then I know you're a pretty big fan of HomePath, and I know you've talked about it with me personally and with other folks out there. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's HomePath and Home Possible. It's another FHA-backed program, and it's similar. It's geared toward first-time home buyers. Those are first-timers. 3.5% to 5% down, which I know in LA sometimes you're like, oh, 5% is great, and you're like, this is a $600,000 property. That's still about $30,000, you know. But it's way better than 120 grand that you have to throw out there. And there are definitely specifics about those programs which you can read about, and I'm open for questions on those. I won't get into them because it's kind of just a lot of intricacies on it. But those are other programs that offer similar. Sometimes they're in different metro areas, so they both try to cover the same goal, but just have different angles on them.
Right on. Okay, and then I actually kind of have a quick question in that, like, for like a VA loan, let's just say.
Yeah.
Do you think that like there's any reason why somebody shouldn't get a VA loan? Like maybe it makes sense for their credit, or maybe it makes sense for whatever reason that going with a conventional loan might be better for them.
Well, this goes back to what your goals are.
Okay.
I can't tell you what your goals are. You have to figure that one out for yourself. If your goal is to own a property and not put rent toward rent, you want to put it toward mortgage. Why wouldn't you move forward with a loan that says, hey, you can get into a property with less than 20% down, near zero, and then the money that you're giving is out going toward a mortgage.
All right.
And being that residential properties you can go up to 4 units. So you can buy a triplex with a VA loan. You can get a duplex with a VA loan. So then you have a tenant paying you, at least subsidizing your mortgage. You know, that on paper, it makes financial sense. But again, that's because I've wanted to work toward this goal of getting what's either called mortgage subsidy, your renters pay some of it, or you live for free, your renters pay all of it. You know, that to me in Los Angeles, because wouldn't it be nice if you could live in a world where rent is usually upwards of 29 to 44% of people's monthly output. 44% on the very high end. Those are high cost cities. That's a lot of money that you're putting out for your rent. You know, wouldn't it be nice if you could bring that down? So then say you know what, you want to travel for work. You want to do work on a project that requires 100% of your time, whatever artistry you're doing, and you don't have to worry about your main cost, which is living. You know, you can reduce that heavily, and then you say, oh, great, now my costs are, 40% less than they were. it just seems like a no-brainer.
Yeah.
And it's a no-brainer just because, I mean, you and I are experienced in real estate. So we just want to introduce the fact that homeownership is possible, but want to be very clear. It is not easy. It is not easy. It takes a lot of dedication. And if there's somebody out there who's just saying like, oh, I just want to go buy a house, but it'll happen where it happens. It's not the attitude. The attitude is, I'm going to make it happen. I will do whatever it takes to make it happen. And I can figure this out. Those you really have to be dedicated to figure this out. Because I can't decide that choice for you. But once you are down that path of I'm 100% committed and you'll do what it takes, then you will close.
Right on. Okay, so I think we should now talk about what you're doing a little bit too, so that it doesn't seem like you're just here willy-nilly, because you are an artist and you sympathize with our woes. But what are you doing also? Because like I said, I'm an artistic director. I love live theater. I do improv. I express myself creatively. But I also am a realtor, and I also work other gig jobs, other side jobs. But realtor is my main thing right now. And so what are you doing other than expressing yourself creatively?
Ironically enough, this property actually got me a job in real estate finance. So
Okay.
now I'm becoming an expert in real estate finance, and I study these programs and all the financing options for real estate as a profession. So the reason I got this job was I met the senior broker of the office, and I presented my loan terms that I was able to accomplish with my property. And he told me flat out, he's like, I can't beat this loan. And he does it. He's way smarter than me. He knows a lot more about it than me, and I'm learning a lot from him. But because of that, he gave me a chance. And so now I work day in and day out, being that no film productions going on right now. I just work in real estate finance, studying loan programs, learning about them, and seeing that the power of money and the power of real estate is very powerful. Of how people can use it to their benefit and grow their wealth. So that's one of the fields of expertise that I'm becoming very, very knowledgeable in.
Right. Yeah. So that's a thing that I really like about your story, and kind of why I gravitated towards you, at least, was that you took something so unconventional, you use it creatively, as most artists do. They take something unconventional, they use it creatively, and they made it work for them. What I love about your story is that essentially you're living in California much less than you would have if you were renting, and you could pursue any passion that you want. And that's like a goal that, like, I'm just like, every artist should get to a point in which they are pursuing the passion that they want, without having to worry too much about where the next paycheck's coming from, or whatever it may be. And yeah, so anyways, that's largely why I became a real estate agent. That's why I first got into real estate, like investing and such, because it just, like, the power of it is just it's pretty great. And I thank you for coming on, because I want as many people to be informed about this sort of stuff as possible. But is there anything else about the NACA program, HomePath, anything else that you're like, you know what, this is I think you need to know this? Because the main thing that I'm seeing from you is that goals are super important. Like, you kind of really need to set your mind to home ownership, and it's not just something that you can dilly-dally into. It's really just like, I want to own a home by X amount of time that will make sense for me in my budget.
Like, I still help a lot of NACA people who are going through the program. And the one thing that I kind of try to communicate to them is have realistic goals. That I think is very crucial, because I met one young lady I was trying to help get a mixed use, which means that there are some commercial units and some residential units. But the expectation was not in line with the reality. Like, if I go through the NACA program and I was like, great, I want to buy a place in Beverly Hills, it's not going to happen, because there are income caps, there are some valuation caps that are limited. That does limit you. But as we all know, as artists using things in unconventional ways, the limits sometimes breed the most creativity. So having that understanding of, like, your market better than I know Los Angeles market, but I don't know anywhere if anyone else is trying to buy another market, is just have a good expectation of what to get. You're not, like, this is your first home, this is your first property. It's not the best. And once you're inside the real estate club of ownership, you just want to get a property to get in. You don't want to buy a lemon, but you, like, if it's not ideal, if it's a 3-2 and it's like, well, this is a 2-2, just if you can get a property, if you can get into it, then you can use that property as leverage for your next one. And that's something that a lot of people don't understand. So having your expectations in line, I think, is really crucial. Understand that we're in a generation where we have to work much harder to get what was very easier to a previous generation.
Yeah.
Parents, they would just go down there, they go, great, that's a house, I'll buy it. income, here it is, great. And it was relatively easy compared to what it is today, which has a lot more barriers to entry.
Yeah.
And these programs out there definitely remove those barriers, but they still need to have a buyer in there that is dedicated, can do it, and just has that perseverance is really, I think, one of the most important character traits when going into real estate. It doesn't mean impossible. I mean, once you're done, because like right now, I don't have as much work to do as I did last year when I was trying to learn how to build flooring, but now I have much less time that I have to dedicate to this property, and I have a lot less stress on the fact that I can't make rent or mortgage like that because I have renters paying me right now.
Right. And you know how to lay flooring, so there's a skill for you.
Lay flooring, do molding.
Right on. Okay, I think this is a pretty decent place to wrap up. If anyone's got any questions, toss them in there. I think we kind of just talked about most of what we got to talk about. Yeah, again, thanks, man, for coming on to this. I do hope for people who are watching right now, I do hope to continue doing this maybe once or twice a month, just to get some more information out there, because unfortunately there is so much misinformation about real estate and what the path to homeownership looks like, and also honestly what homeownership period, like the path looks like escrow, what just finding the right property looks like, what you need to do in order to get enough funds for yourself, and I just want the information to be much easier to get to, as opposed to like sifting through so much just garbage that's out there on the internet. Because I mean, I haven't gone through the NACA program, but I have like watched YouTube videos. I have like about other people who have gone through the program. I've researched the site, read reviews about it, and I get more out of talking with you, who's actually been out of it, been through it. I get more out of that, far more than anything else that I've done. And I'm hoping that I can continue to bring these sorts of things to the interwebs, and hopefully we can make this a thing.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of other aspects that we can dive deeper into that are helpful. And again, that'll just sort of be information out there for people to be able to get to home ownership. It's not impossible. It's just much more difficult than it was.
Yeah, it won't look like it did for our parents, unfortunately.
Exactly.
And unfortunately, what's even worse is the longer that we wait, the harder that it gets. But nevertheless, programs like this exist. Programs like the VA loan, Home Possible. Those things exist. Not a lot of people know about them. They should know about them. It's not gonna be easy, but whenever you're ready, I'm here to help you. Jonathan's here to help you, and just send us a message, guys.
Yeah.
You good, Jonathan?
Absolutely.
Right on. All right. Good night, guys. I love you. Bye.